Yeah, there may be some of you going like, oh, did Billy just say the way? And you're thinking of Star Wars, right? And it's like, that may be the most applicable way for people to kind of understand the Tao. Like Star Wars is based a lot off Taoism and the way.
Right. I go to all the churches to hear the different names of the one true God. That's a quote from Rumi. And I think about the first verse in the Tao Te Ching and how that applies to, wow, there's just this, there's no naming.
About Islam, that, they actually refrain from trying to label who the God is. So that, in a mosque, there's just an empty chair that signifies the Lord, the one, God. One of the things I noticed in the Tao that I found a little more unique, there seems to be a sense of like, let go, be in the flow, be at ease. Like, okay, yeah, whatever we are doing in the moment, seems the most important thing to be done next. Be with that. Hey, welcome in to Conscious Conversations. I'm your host, Nitin Garg, joined by my humble partner in crime, Nick Palladino-King.
I don't know about humble, but I'll take partner in crime.
Depending on how he's feeling today.
That's how much coffee I've had.
Yeah. And we want to welcome in one of our first guests on the show, and really our brother at heart. We all kind of really kicked it off once we met the first time, Billy Mandarino. Billy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Nick. You are one of my synchronicity brothers. I feel like there are no accidents, and we all connected for a reason, and we're here to serve all your viewers and listeners. And I'm just honored to be here, man.
Some of the longtime listeners might remember us lighting a log fire from way back in episode 3. If you haven't heard that one, that is a amazing conversation. So, but keep listening for now, and you can go back to episode 3 to really see to get to know Billy at another level. Billy, what do we have going on today? I know we were talking about, just prior to the show, we were talking about Taoism and the deep philosophy of the Tao, and how you've been a student of it, a practitioner for 10 plus years. You say you're not a master, but next to us, you're a master. And we're curious how we can dive into that, what you've learned from that philosophy, how you apply it in your life, and what practical tips or ways in which our listeners can really take that into their own lives.
Thank you, Nitin and Nick, for bringing that up, because the Tao Te Ching has, it's a 2,500-year-old book. It's 500 years, published prior to the Bible. So that's 5 centuries. That's a long time. Yeah. And it's the second most published book in the world. Its wisdom it's very simple. There's only 81 short verses, but it was written by Lao Tzu in China. And his teachings are universal. There's they've taken the Bible, Jesus' teachings, and they've taken Lao Tzu's teachings are from the Tao Te Ching, and they completely all connect. They all correlate. So there's 2 billion Christians on the planet. I forget how many Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists are on the planet, but you think about it's over half the planet that's connecting.
Plus or minus a billion.
Plus or minus, exactly, whatever it is. I just know that it is divine teaching. It's spiritual teaching that connects us all into the oneness. And it's a simple book, and anybody can pick it up from any walk of life and find value. And it talks so much about living like water. The ocean stays low, and all of the bidding of the rivers and the streams do their action and their efforts to get to this lowest place, which is to stay content, to stay humble, which is a very simple teaching. But the watercourse way, or the Wu way that they say in the Tao Te Ching, and the Tao means the way. Living the virtue of the great way is what Tao Te Ching means. Living the virtue of the great way. So the way, to me, is the way back to your highest self, back to the oneness, back to what we all come from, but we're going to return to. And one of my favorite translations, because there's thousands of translations of the Tao Te Ching by different authors, by different speakers and teachers, but Dr. Wayne Dyer has this beautiful version that's called Living the Wisdom of the Tao Te Ching, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And that's the one that I always gravitate to. It's on Audible, you can listen to it, but there's just so much that you can apply to your life in this simple teaching. You can leave it in the glove box of your car and just pick it up and open up a chapter and then meditate on it. It'll, for your day, it'll be of service. There's so much that I've learned about this book that's led so much into the Taoist teaching, the book that I wrote, the Taoist, the seminars, the events, the coaching, the music we've written. It all is in perfect alignment with the Tao and with these conscious teachings that come from a place that's beyond all of us, but we're all connected to. It's really about being in the oneness, and the Tao is the simplest form of teaching that I have found to access it.
Yeah, there may be some of you going like, "Oh, did Billy just say the way?" And you're thinking of Star Wars, right? And it's like that may be the most applicable way for people to kind of understand the Tao. Like Star Wars is based a lot off Taoism and the way.
Right.
So that just a funny thing. People might start to go, "Oh, wow, I've heard this language." It's actually very prevalent in our culture already. We just don't necessarily know about it. And side note, Nitin had asked me, "Oh, should I read the Tao Te Ching, quickly before this call?" And I said, "No, you can't.
Yeah.
You
Right.
literally can't. Like you will read one page and be floored. At least that's been my experience.
Right,
and you
Nick.
go, "Oh my God!" And I chew on this thing all day, and then you're thinking, and you realize, so it's not a read through type of book in my experience. It is like Billy said, you pick at it, you learn something, you think about it, you see where it shows up, and then it changes the way in which you operate in the world.
Well, the very first verse of the Tao Te Ching, Nick and Nitin, is the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. I mean, there it is, the very first one. Like we have the name of God, we have Muhammad, we have all these different names for God, for the one God.
Yeah.
And I think Rumi says, I love hearing I go to all the churches to hear the different names of the one true God. That's a quote from Rumi. And I think about the first verse in the Tao Te Ching and how that applies to, wow, there's just there's no naming. There's no physical time to bring into this quantifying this one name that's infinite and can't be encapsulated in a moment. It's eternal. And I love that. That's the opening line for a reason, I'm sure. And that one verse, think about how you can apply that to your life. And all your listeners and viewers can think about that. Well, I always try to name things and find a connection to it in a physical, ephemeral way. But the reality is it's infinite. It's amorphous. You have to, like the Tao teaches, like water, how do you experience water? You can't grasp it. It eludes you. You have to immerse yourself in it, become one with it, and then you experience the way.
I also found it very fascinating when I learned about Islam that, they actually refrain from trying to label who the God is. So that, in a mosque, there's just an empty chair that signifies the Lord, the one, God. And when you go to other mosques, I've been to like Hagia Sophia and Istanbul. Someone tried to paint the picture in a face, and they eventually took it off because they don't want to associate a physical depiction of a person with God. And I found that very interesting in that culture.
Limiting, Nick and Nitin, do you feel the limitation when you just simply say God or Allah or Krishna or even Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita? Like, do you feel like these limitations come from a word? Do you feel that? I kind of feel it in my physiology and in my energy.
Yeah. To me, it is they create pictures. And to your point, Billy, like the second I say God, to me that has a meaning, for you, each has a different one. For everyone listening, it's different. So it's like I'm in my mind, I'm now labeling something that can't be labeled. So then therefore it isn't. And that can be something quite challenging to actually talk about, because words don't actually do it justice, because they can't, because we're talking about non-duality and we're using dualistic words to describe something that's non-dual. I'm pretty impressed I just got that out of my mouth, because that came from personal experience and spiritual experience, not necessarily a spiritual understanding. And I'll do that a lot when I talk to people and they say, "Oh, like what is God, or how do you explain present moment?" And I just put up my finger and I just point at it. And I don't say anything, because what I'm implying is there's only one, and even defining it as one now makes it two. So yes, for me, it creates pictures. And Billy, I think this is in line with you. The less pictures we have, the more present we are. The pictures bring us out of present moment. We're not in the now when we are thinking about how things should be or could be, and we're missing the mark.
That's what
except the day-to-day problem for most of us ends up being that, we're surrounded by pictures and concepts and ways of looking at things.
We have to learn to detach from outcomes, detach from people, to get into, as Nick said, the oneness is. And Zen, it's the same thing. It's always says, if not now, when, right? If not now, when. It's like now, right? Now is the time where.
And in yoga, they kick off the sutras by saying, "And now begins yoga," in the same way. And you go, and then you forget, and they go, "And now begins yoga again," and now begins yoga. And so they're all actually starting in the exact same way as well, which is amazing to look at.
It was so interesting. Recently, I got to see Steve Martin. You know Steve Martin, the famous actor, comedian? So he was here at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, pre-film festival screening of his documentary. And he was doing a Q&A. And I was in the theater, and but they were showing one of his stand-ups, and it was one of his funny bits. Was like he'd walk on the stage, 10,000 people. I'm so happy to be here, and he'd walk over to the stage. I'm so happy to be here, and he'd walk to another spot. He kept walking. I'm so happy to be here. No, I'm happy to be here. Like that. He doesn't know how great what he was saying is, and how he was cracking up. But there's the thing: is like the now is everywhere. But how often do we really surrender to it and realize like this is where I'm supposed to be? I'm so happy to be in this moment. Can I stay in this moment and just not wish it was different or hope for the next thing that's going to come along? Like it's a practice. It's a way of life that you have to surrender to. And I know you both are in that same headspace where how many habits can you create to live more in the present moment and be happy to be here now?
Yeah. And this like, this deep realization that emerges that this is the only moment, like as us beings that we get to experience. So yes, we can reflect on what's just happened even moments ago. And yes, we can project on what we would like to do moments from now. But in essence, once I think people drop into that deep realization of that this is the only moment I ever get to experience in my life. And so being with this very moment and continue to breathe through it, connect with it, be very present, enjoy whatever it might be. I'm actually, one of the things that I'm really working on, and I notice a tendency in my routine. I pick up my kids from school and I'm still thinking about work. And I give my son lunch. We try to have lunch together every day after school. And my mind still goes back to work. Like the transition hasn't occurred. So one of my practices these days is, okay, how do I bring I catch myself. It's kind of like a live meditation happening. I catch myself thinking about something else, and I go, I'm with my son now. How was his day? What's his experience?
Apropos, Nitin, for everybody's life. I'm sure listening to this and everyone in the world, they struggle with that. I think that's a conscious growth that the whole planet needs. And back to the Tao, I mean, you literally could have that little book and just like feeling that way, just grab it and randomly open up a chapter, and it would speak to something in you that you could apply instantly. And I think it shifted me. It has shifted me thousands of times when I find myself getting caught up in the world and living of the world instead of out of the world, and in infinite oneness and timelessness. And especially when I get outcome focused. That's the one thing I'm working on really diligently lately, is detaching from outcomes. I think if more people could learn to detach from the outcomes, but have the intention and the attention to manifest and to bring this wonderful thing into your life, whatever it is, but then learn to detach from it and just let the Wu way, which talks about the Tao, which in Christianity also just talks about surrender, the active side of infinity. A lot of great teachers talked about the active side of infinity, which I love because that means, wait a minute, peaceful and I'm in the present moment, but I'm also active because my awareness and my intention is guiding me, not so much my doing and physical linear time, psychological time. But if you can get in that oneness, the vertical, which is here now, all this abundance flows into you, like the rivers, like the Tao, like the rivers. They say lay low, lay low like the ocean, be the source.
One of the things I noticed in the Tao that I found more unique, and I've been reading the Cliff Notes version, so that's why we need Billy here.
It's enough.
There seems to be a sense of like let go, be in the flow, be at ease, and I find that to be true as well. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever we are doing in the moment, whatever is directly, seems the most important thing to be done next, be with that. But there seems to be more subtleties in the Tao. So I'm curious, Billy, if you can speak to that. Like, what is this sense of letting go and being at ease?
I think the most quoted verse in the Tao is a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. You've all heard that, correct?
Yes.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. I mean, there it is. And he also talks about the 10,000 things. Lao Tzu talks about the 10,000 things. We're all caught up in the 10,000 things. Well, we are part of the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things are this attracting or trying to grasp for these things and accomplish things and be in the world and to have accomplishments and success because of our comparison mentality. Well, the 10,000 things and that journey and the one step, it begins with one step. That one step is the now. That one step is what we were talking about detaching from outcome, knowing that in this step you'll be guided, and then you'll take the next step. And it's not about attachment to the 1,000 miles to get to the 1,000th mile. It's about, no, what are we going to? It begins with this one step. But that one step is taken many, many times a day. And and that step can be a thought. That step can be a small action. It can be an action of service. We get so caught up in the 10,000 things. So as you read the Tao Te Ching, he references the 10,000 things so frequently because he knows that people struggle with that. And the world struggled with that 2,500 years ago, 10,000 years ago. We always struggle with that because we're in this physical time. But he always reaches back to let's do the simple thing and let's do it now and let's make it not difficult. That's why the Wu way, the watercourse way, there's infinite, there's serenity, there's surrender. There's so many precepts in the Tao that teach how to get out of the action, do the action. But isn't that interesting that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step is the most quoted and the most common, and people that haven't even read it know that quote, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And yet probably the most missed. I mean, that is what
means, right, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, that is what the majority of us on this planet are missing the point of. I've said that twice, and that's actually the definition of sin, by the way, if you're listening, is to miss the mark. And it's interesting that we're all then, in terms of the Tao, we're all sinning in that we're missing the mark of this present moment is what we're focusing on, and then the next one. And then for me as a yogic practitioner, that's breath. Can I make it through this breath? And also, if you're listening, I hope you don't think that we're talking only about the positive aspects of staying present. We're also talking about when life is tough and there's trauma and there's pain, can you stay present within that? And that's where you really learn about your practice. Because, yeah, it's probably a little easier to stay present and to not judge when you feel good. But can you stay present and not judge when you feel like shit? And that's when I've had to go literally one breath at a time, and even one inhale at a time. Okay, I can do one inhale. Okay, I made it that far. Can I go to the exhale now? And it's okay, now I did. Okay, now next breath. And I think we've all had those moments when we're at our razor's edge of what we can handle. Billy, you had mentioned habits in order to learn how to stay present and to stay in the way. Can you talk about what some of those are in terms of the habits that actually help us stay present?
Well, I think you started with I think one of the most important, and you can speak into this too, Nick and Nitin. I find when I'm teaching, when I'm experiencing groups of people, when I'm dealing with an individual that's maybe mentally overwhelmed and is in a panic attack, I always go back to the breath. That's the very first step, because your mind, right? It's spinning out of control. It's swinging branch to branch on the monkey mind. It cannot find the present moment because it's in physical time. So the breath, which is a physical apparatus in your physical body that can connect to the prana, to the energy centers of your body, but it's the breath, right? You follow the breath. And just like you said, an exhale, I mean, that's the simplest way I find. That's always step one for me, helping somebody get it. My daughter, if she's having a panic attack or an anxious moment, I will literally just say, let's sit, just follow my breath, let me lead you through this breath cadence. And then boom, then we can go into the next step, which, okay, let's change what we're focused on. Let's change the pictures in our mind. Let's relax our physiology. Let's unclench your hands, right? Let's sit in a good posture, and then align her. But it's always the breath, Nick. So I'm teaching and working on myself constantly with breath. Awareness is the key, right? I mean, step one is always awareness, but I guess, I would say the breath is the most powerful thing that I can do to interrupt patterns of stress and overwhelm and anxiety, especially in my life. Because when the thinking mind happens, I don't know about you guys, but I just feel it takes me out of the awareness. And once I know, okay, I am stressed, that's the first step out of stress. But then the best thing for me to change my physiology is the breath. And like you said, the inhale, the exhale. And you can probably speak, Nick, to the yogic power or the prana, the energy, the inner energy field of the body, and how breath, does it follow, in your opinion, the energy centers, the 7 chakras? Is it important to have an exhale? I mean, I have a box breathing kind of thing that we do. But speak from a yoga practitioner, a yoga professional, the power of the breath.
What's interesting, you touched on it, is so the breath is the fascia. It's the intermediary between the mind and the body. It's not tangible, but we can still feel it and sense it, where the mind isn't, the body is. So it's the gateway between the two. So something they'll say in Tantra is energy follows your mind follows your energy, or thoughts follow energy follow thoughts. So what Tantra is saying is it comes from both directions. Meaning, if I restrict my physiology and I clench down, that's going to then affect my breathing, which affects how I think and how I feel. So inversely, it has to be true in the other way, that if I change my breathing patterns, that will then affect how I think and how I feel. And actually, ultimately, how my life is. Change your breath, change your thoughts, change your life. So what I'm saying is it goes both ways. And the breath is the pranic body. It's the energy body, which is the intermediary between mind and body, where mind would be the intermediary between breath and deeper states of awareness. So they're all alive. So you can affect it either way. And you can use breath in an intentional way based off your desires as a prescriptive method. So Billy's using box breathing. That's more of a regulatory, balanced breath. If Nitin's stressed, I would have him do extended exhaling. That's going to help him relieve tension. If I'm tired, I'm going to do extended inhaling, and that's going to energize me. So there's almost infinite ways to use the breath in order to transform your physiology and how you're thinking and how you're feeling. So I think it's our most applicable tool. I think it's Eckhart Tolle says, if you pay attention to nothing else but your breath for a year, that will teach you more than anything else and any teacher ever could.
You're so
Because
right.
you
I'm
just
glad you quoted him. That's the truth.
yeah, and I know
You know,
like
the
when we're
thing about-
talking, I pay attention to my belly. Am I clenching? Where is it? So and if it's stuck, your energy's stuck. So
Do you want to know another great thing I heard about breath? I remember seeing this teaching on how breath is the one thing that took high-level, world-class athletes like Tiger Woods, like Tom Brady, Nadal, Rafa Nadal, Djokovic. So they talked about, what's the one thing? He says, you know what? I just learned how to control my breathing in the key moments. And it wasn't about some strategy or some technique they learned. I said, no, I just learned how to breathe when I was in these peak moments. And that they all went back to breath. And it was all these, 10 different world-class
have you guys seen, so interesting on that, have you guys seen the newest LeBron James commercial?
No.
It's what you just said, Billy, and it's showing where the world's going. So follow what elite athletes are doing. They've got the best coaches for mindset, breath work. Tony Robbins is the coach for the Warriors, by the way. There's no coincidence there. He was on the bench during the finals. So the commercial of Nike is LeBron James on the sideline with his eyes closed in a game, breathing, and he's just inhaling slow and exhaling slow. And it's like, are you paying attention? This is a national commercial with LeBron James controlling his breath in between a timeout. And I was like, that's cool.
All of us, a mom, a dad, a dentist, a teacher, anybody can control their breath to help them get into peak performance. It's so underutilized, isn't it? It's too simple. I guess the problem is the world likes a sexy, clever thing. They want the technique.
Yeah.
And it's so available to all of us. It's like when they say when it's right underneath your nose is when you miss it. And this is literally right underneath our nose.
That's good. That's good. And it's free. You can do it anywhere, anytime.
Well, if Eckhart Tolle, who's, I believe, the most successful, spiritual, influential teacher on the planet right now, when Dr. Wayne passed in 2015, I know I'm going way back, but he was the third most spiritually influential teacher in the world. Dalai Lama was number 2, and Eckhart was number 1 at the time. I'm assuming he's still there. But if his grand teaching is to, hey, do nothing but follow your breath or focus on your breath for, did he say a year, Nick?
Yeah, that's what he did when he almost killed himself and he was going through an existential life. He just sat on a bench for a year at a park and he listened to his breath and he watched it, because it'll tell you how you're thinking and how you're feeling instantly. Like I can just feel right now, I got some tension in my belly. It's like, okay, what is that telling me? I'm restricting my breath. Okay, if I breathe into it, I feel more relaxed. Yeah.
Diaphragmatic breathing, there is a powerful breath in itself. If you can learn to diaphragmatically breathe. Because I'm a singer, so when you sing, you have to sing and support from that breath. And so speaking as a speaker, you have to support from that breath. I've done some live events where I talk for 20 hours over 3 days. And I never had a hoarse voice. But the support of your diaphragm and your breathing supports the air through your entire body. I mean, it's so powerful. So diaphragmatic breathing is a very powerful way to also changes the lymphatic system of your body. The lymph will move. It can only move through tightening and loosening muscles by the constriction and relaxing of muscles.
I've had that described as, you want to sort of relax your belly, and as you're breathing so that your lungs can expand through your rib cage, right down below where the rib cage is open. Is that what we're referring to as diaphragmatic breathing? Or is that maybe
can you put your hand on your stomach and you breathe in and you let your stomach like a balloon expand? You can do it. Anybody can do it right now. You just put your hand on your belly button and just breathe in, and don't breathe from your lungs. You breathe and let your belly just expand. That's diaphragmatic breathing. You can practice it. It's a musculature, and you can literally learn a different type of breath that to expand, because your lymph, extracts the waste of your lymph. It's very powerful.
And it was actually I forget where exactly I learned this. It was some TEDx video, I think. But they were literally talking about this aspect of breathing where we relax our stomach and let the lungs expand. Because if we don't, we're only using about 60% of our capacity in the lungs if we're not doing diaphragmatic breathing. Because the lungs have nowhere to go in the rib cage. There's very little expansion that occurs when we breathe just in the upper body.
Well, look
versus
at a dog.
when we allow
Watch a
the
dog breathe, Nitin.
yeah,
Watch a dog breathe. It's all watch a baby breathe. It's all from
they've
belly.
got it down.
We learn, right? We've conditioned ourselves out of the diaphragmatic breath, which is very powerful. It's so
Happens,
if you're gonna
and that
breathe,
usually happens. That usually happens around age 5. By the way, if you guys know that, when we
I
send
did
kids
not.
off to kindergarten, that's when they switch from belly breathing to chest breathing
Wow, that
because they're
fast.
watching us. They're watching us crazy adults.
Yeah, be stressed and have a shallow breathing and like
Yep.
hyperventilate and just be so quick to take a breath of, and not a conscious breath, like conscious breath.
Yeah.
That's the power.
Well, and there's so much focus that also goes on the like, oh, keep that tummy in, like, oh, look at that tummy, you know. So people start to
You see your ripped abs.
exactly. So breathing, okay. What is are there specific references to breathing in the Tao as well? So is there a link there? Do you remember any verses that specifically speak to that?
You know what? It's a good question. I can't really think. I always know Tao is so focused on water.
Water,
The
yeah.
Way, the water course way. Alan Watts wrote a version of it called the Tao, the water course way, which means, water has no resistance. It's the softest substance in the world, but it's the most powerful substance.
And adapts to everything around it.
Absolutely. And it has, and it just finds its way. And there's no, like he talks about, I mean, look at the Grand Canyon, obviously, right? That was carved by water over millennia. There's so many teachings I don't know. I'm sure there's some teachings around breath, but we are born in water, right? I mean, there's so much about water and how water is the softest substance,
the elixir of life.
This flexibility. It talks about flexibility a lot. It talks about not being hard. It talks about being like a tree, like a sapling can bend, but as it gets older, it gets more brittle and it breaks. It always talks about non-resistance. It's just such a phenomenal book, but it's different. Every time I read it, I learn something new. You've heard that about great books, right? Pick it up, and it finds you. I mean, that's why I think it's important. Nisargadatta Maharaj wrote a great book called I Am That. And he told Dr. Wayne, because he was a teacher of Dr. Wayne Dyer, he says, you don't even have to read it. Just carry it along with you. Keep it in your glove compartment because there's the energy in there will serve you. So the Tao is very much like that. Put it on your phone. I mean, you can just download it. It's such a short book. Leave it on your phone and just tap it every once in a while and just open to a random page. And when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or lost or you want to find a synchronicity, just let it speak to you. There's such an incredible power in this wisdom. It's one of the wisest books ever written.
Yeah, I love the power of that because, I follow a spiritual diary by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's like this calendar thing, and I'll just go and refresh the website. And there's a verse for each day through the year. And one of the ones yesterday, in fact, I'll pull it up and read. I haven't read the one today, so let's see what it is and see what it says. Desires are the most unrelenting enemies of man. He cannot appease them. Have only one desire, to know God. Satisfying the sensory desires cannot satisfy you because you are not the senses. They are only your servants, not yourself.
Amen.
And so I'll go to some of these verses as, like you're mentioning, Billy, as a peek into what the wise have said over the years, right? Holding all of this knowledge in our brains all the time, being present with it is difficult. But when we can refer to something like the Tao or frankly, any great book on this planet and read a verse a day, and like you were saying, Nick, try not to read the whole thing in one day. You're not going to get much out of it. But even if you read just 2 lines and sit with those 2 lines for that day, that is more than sufficient. And it touches something deep inside us.
It does so much. That's why Wayne Dyer spent an entire year writing this book called Live, and he meditated on it and wrote these great essays. That's why I like that version of the Tao, because he goes through it, yet he also applies it to this world and how you can apply it to your life.
Billy, what other habits? We talked about breath. What else do you specifically use that you've learned to pull you into being present, to pull you into being now?
Well, I think I feel and know from my experience that my imagination is the greatest gift that God has given me. I feel like when I can use, there's a meditation in my book, The Taoist. It's the Taoist meditation, and it's these 4 prayers connected to this visualization pattern, using your imaginations to get out of physical time. Because I find linear time and physical psychological time pulls us out of the present moment, because we're always in the seeking, we're always in the, and Einstein, who I think was just so beyond a spiritual teacher. Everyone thinks of him as this brilliant mind. We have these simple quotes like imagination is more powerful than knowledge. Knowledge can take you from A to B, but imagination encircles the planet. I mean, that was his quote about how powerful imagination was. And our daughter just turned 18. And my entire fatherhood with her and rearing her, I've always thought about what he said about how to make genius children. He said, if you want to make a child a genius, read them fairy tales. If you want to make them more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. And so I've done that my entire fathering of my daughter, who's got one more year and she's off to college. It's breaking my heart. It's been the greatest mission of my life, the greatest service and the greatest experience I've ever had as being a dad to my beautiful daughter, our beautiful daughter. But my imagination was always drawn to bedtime stories and teaching her and creating stories in my imagination at night before she went to bed. The most programmable part of our day is right before we go to bed, right? Our subconscious mind sits in this semi-somnolent state, and it marinates in the last thoughts you had for 4 hours in your subconscious mind. So I was always priming my daughter with her imagination and then using my imagination to give her images to marinate on before she went to bed. So I've never stopped. I've been applying that to my life. And the Taoist meditation in my book there are these 4 prayers coupled with the feeling of your imagination putting you 3 miles above the earth. I imagine I'm hovering above the earth, and I do this meditation many times a day. I do a convergent meditation with my eyes closed and a divergent meditation with my eyes open. I could be driving, walking my dog, going to an appointment. But the imagination for me is the habit that I've consistently focused on and worked on and honed to live in that imaginative state, to focus on what it is I want to manifest in my life, thinking from the end of it, not about the end. Like right now, like literally when we're done with this podcast, I'm going off to show a bunch of realtors this property I have to sell. And when I go into that property, I imagine before anybody shows up, I see it is already sold. I imagine there's a family. It's Christmas time. The Christmas tree is here. I'm bringing over a closing gift for the purchase. They made this beautiful home they bought. And I use my imagination. So when I live in the end, which is your imagination, fully aware and all 5 senses are connected to the end of this. Well, my imagination becomes the most powerful gift. It's also a clue because imagination, the first 2 letters are I and M. I am is the name of God. So you look in Exodus where Moses was told the name of God. His name is I am that I am. So imagination and I am feel like a connection to the oneness and to the source.
And
Just give me goosebumps.
Yeah. It's making me really think about what I do before bed and how many of us are quote unquote doom scrolling and absorbing in a bunch of junk and then wondering why we can't sleep and we wake up unwell. It's like, wow, that makes me really want to check in with my sleep hygiene and starting to make shifts there. But what I'm getting is it sounds like when we're thinking, we're not present. I have a mantra that I use that I say to myself, when I think, I stop. Because the second my mind starts to try to figure out the problem that my mind created, I know I'm stuck. So it sounds like, Billy, what you're hinting at is thinking is actually what keeps us away from being present. And it also limits our reality, where imagination allows us to step outside the bounds or step outside the limits of this physical time and space we live in.
Absolutely. Einstein had it right. And that's why he shared it with the world, I think in the 40s. That was one of his famous quotes. And no, I don't think anybody really understood it back then. How powerful.
What was the quote?
Imagination is more important than knowledge.
Okay, that's the one you're
Knowledge
referring
take you
to.
from A to B, but imagination encircles the world.
And the what was coming up for me as you were saying that, Nick, was I feel it's more about being present to our thinking. So just like imagination too, I see a lot of folks, a lot of my clients, negative imagination, using their imagination for all the things they actually don't want in their life, but some habits, some thinking patterns are so deep that they're actually constantly using their imagination to imagine the worst case scenario.
Yeah, totally.
But if they're present to that,
you get what you focus on. Like Nick was saying,
right.
Whatever you focus on expands.
And if we're present to that thinking, and I think, Billy, to your point, like there's something, of course, there's the deep aspect of what the Tao is teaching in terms of being like water, connecting with the way. There's also this set of the intention where we are clear and aligned with what do we actually want in our life, so that when we're present to our thinking, is it aligned? Is our thinking aligned? Is our imagination aligned? And where do we need to course correct? So I feel like it's actually more about, are we passively thinking, which is what a lot of the world is in a bit of a
group think. Yeah, group
a habit, versus are we conscious of our thinking and directing that thinking in the way that we're wanting to create what we desire. Like you said, Billy, hey, I go into this next bit of work that I'm going to do. I'm imagining the outcome I'd like to create. Now, it may turn out that way, it may not, but at least your intention, your energy is aligned with the outcome you'd like to create.
And here's the rub, Nitin, is you have to then detach from that outcome. That's why your imagination is
Level 10.
incredible gifts you've been given, because when you can live in the end with all five, like it's already done. I smell the turkey. I smell the tree. I feel the sense of love in that house at Christmas. But I set the intention and then I let go. I don't just surrender and do nothing. I mean, I still do open houses. I send out flyers. I, show the property, but I don't have the fear of it not selling. And I've sold so many properties living with that higher self and an intention of thinking from the end instead of about the end, that it's putting my daughter through college. Yeah. So I feel so blessed to know that it's the simplest thing, like breath. It's a simple habit you can initiate, but it takes a consistent focus and an awareness that, like you said, Nitin, you're thinking about by reaction the worst possible outcome, opposed to this would work out perfect. I can see it being exactly how I want it to be.
Imagine just saying, like, our tendency as humans, and this is biological for survival, is to focus on the negative, because the negative will kill us, the positive won't. So we tend to say, what's the worst thing that could happen? I rarely hear someone say, what's the best thing that can happen here, guys?
So
like,
rare.
what's the, and I had that realization with a friend recently. I was like, oh, when I step into the abyss of the unknown, it can be very overwhelming. But I'm like, but also I'm forgetting the fact that there's infinite possibility, which means the worst thing and the best thing are both available. So why not say, what's the best thing that can happen? And thinking's not bad. Concentration leads to meditation. That's how we get there. But Billy, as you're talking, there's a line from the Yoga Sutras, which has transformed my life, and you've been saying it this whole time, and it's the teaching of abhyasa and vairagya, which is 100% effort and non-attachment to the result. And when I heard that teaching for the first time, it transformed my life, because I was getting stuck in, well, I shouldn't be trying. I shouldn't be attached. Like, no. Do your best in every single moment, and then release your actions at the feet of the gods and let the gods decide what's right, and let the gods decide the outcome. And then it gives you this sense of like freedom that you can do anything, because you don't have the energy of fear on the back end preventing you from succeeding. And then all of a sudden you go, wait, I let go and actually I've achieved more. It's like, do less to achieve more. And you can't think that one. You got to live that one.
It sounds like the water course way, doesn't it? It sounds like what the Tao is teaching. Be low like the ocean, and all the rivers, which are all the actions you wanted, all the intentions and hopes and dreams you have, they're all just working their way to the low, content source, which is acting in non-attachment, because it is the one. And we're living like just what you said, Nick. It's perfect. It leads perfectly into the Tao and the teachings of the Tao, which means it's actionless doing. It's karma yoga,
which is dedicating yourself to action and then not being attached to the result. That's karmic yoga. I'm even thinking of the ocean. I never thought of this before, that everything leads to the ocean, and that's like the bottom. That's the bottom of like Earth, but then beneath the ocean, then there's all the depth. That's such. I gotta meditate on that. That's such a cool feeling of everything comes down, and then there's actually depth beneath.
That is
which
interesting.
We're not
I've
even
never
aware
thought
of.
about that either, Nick. That's a really cool concept. If you think about the ocean, we look at it as the surface, right? This mass, 70% of the Earth is water. We're 70% water, but beyond that, the depth. I think maybe that's the deeper conscious. God, Christ consciousness, Buddha awareness, Krishna, whatever you want to call it. But there's the deeper awareness, which is what we come from, what we return to.
I've always thought about and a lot of people talk about the ocean as this world unto its own, because even though it is part of this world, so much of it is unknown, unexplored. I mean, how many of us have spent a significant percentage of our time in the ocean? It's humongous. Every time I look at the ocean, it just boggles my mind how much water there is on this planet.
It's vast. It's infinite. It's just kind of like it's us. Like we come from like, I love this. So they say you take a bucket out of and I live across the street from the ocean. So I was doing a teaching with a client once, and I took him over to the beach, and I brought a bucket with us, and I sat there, and this person was suicidal. They're in really bad shape. And I just sat there, and for a half hour, we didn't say anything. And then I finally walked down to the ocean, and he sat there at the beach, and I filled the bucket with water. I came back and I sat next to us. I just let a lot of time go by. I just sat there and waited till he would ask me, what's that? I says, you take the bucket, you take the water out of the ocean, and it only evaporates when it becomes separate from its source. And it's altogether the ocean, and the ocean is altogether in the bucket. But it's when you're separate from the source, you lose your connection, that you lose the oneness, what you come from, what you return to. So the teaching, I wanted him to understand that I was so caught up in my head and so caught up in financial disaster. My relationships fell apart. And I lost my kids in the divorce. And I said, no, like you need to connect back to the source. But remember, we can't name it, as the first verse of the Tao Te Ching says. You have to become one with that source, because you're separate from the source right now, and you'll evaporate just like this bucket. And that's what's happening now. You've evaporated. You've lost your connection back to the source. And it was the one teaching that changed his life. It took him on a different trajectory, because he had a visceral physical connection to, whoa, he's this container that is all together God, and God is all together him. But when you keep yourself separate, you have to become one with it. And that shift, he changed his habits. He changed his connection to what it meant to be. So he became a devout Christian, that was his calling, because he was raised that way. But he'd gotten out of it. But it was the simple teaching. I think we all can put ourselves in those shoes to how connected are we to the source?
Yeah.
And I'm
That's
just
beautiful.
getting this image of,
Thank you for sharing.
yeah, thanks. And I'm getting this image that when we're unconnected from the source, we dry up. And how many of us are dry, and unfulfilled and unnurtured and unwatered. And we have all these material possessions and items and comforts, yet we're unhappy. And it's what you just said, Billy, where the majority of us are disconnected from ourselves, first of all, and then disconnected from the source of where we come from. And we're constantly looking to fix that. We're always looking to put a Band-Aid over the bullet hole with more comfort and more things. And it's like, that's just a salve. It's not going to fix the root cause, which is that we feel disconnected from the soul of the world. And it's accessible to all of us, which I really love about this conversation. You can do it. You just carry around the book and it'll start to happen. Think about it. It'll start to happen. Believe it. It'll start to happen.
Yeah.
In this day and age, people can just put it on their phone. Pick up the physical book. I think is better than the phone if you can. Order it on Amazon or find it in the bookstore. But get the book and keep it with you. And just keep it in your glove box. Keep it in your bag. Just keep it handy and pick it up randomly. And I love synchronicities. We've all talked about synchronicities, but books, highly conscious books, they have things to teach us. We just have to have the eyes to see the spiritual breadcrumbs. But I'll be in a hotel room and I'll see the Bible, then I'll grab it randomly and just open it, close my eyes and point to it. And every time it has something to teach me. These wisdom teachings are for everybody.
Yeah.
And there's many, many books that can do that, but pick the one that serves you. But I recommend the Tao Te Ching for this conversation. That there's millions of people out there, I think, that could be served by having that practice.
Yeah. And thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation today and really opening up ourselves and the audience to it. I certainly had a bit of an epiphany moment as you were describing that story. And it's like, oh, no wonder it feels so good to just be with the breath. No wonder it feels so good to be in the silence and meditate for whatever time is possible, because it's like cultivating this connection back to the source.
That's what
and being with the stillness.
Thank you for bringing that through. Sorry to interrupt you, brother. But yeah, the breath is like the source, like the ocean. Like the breath can be that vast, infinite space that we can connect to. The bucket, right? We can bring that breath, that conscious breath, which would fill the bucket and allow us to be connected back to the oneness.
Yeah. Thank you, brothers. Thank you for being here with us. And thank you for bringing the teachings of the Tao to all of us. Really appreciate it, and always great to be with you. For those that are listening, thank you for being with this conversation today. If you want to hear more of Billy, go to episode number 3. That will light your log on fire. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Billy at Billy. What's the website they can go to?
It's billymandarino.com. It's MANDARINO, billymandarino.com. It's kind of the mothership for all the content. And man, I love you, Nick. I love you, Nitin. You guys are brothers from another mother, but we're all connected to
from the mother.
Grandma, the source, truly the source. I'm just so grateful for both of you, man, and for the work you put out in this world. Your podcast is one of the greatest podcasts out there, period, hands down.
You.
People subscribe, like, share this incredible conscious conversations that Nick and Nitin bring to this world. They're truly serving the planet.
Thank you. And for the audience, if you found this conversation to be helpful for you, please like and share. That's how we spread the word. That's how we spread the good messages out there. That's how we lift the consciousness of the planet, one conversation at a time. All right. Take care, gentlemen. Till next time.
Namaste. I love you, brothers.
Thanks, guys. Love you guys.